The storm is coming, and for many it has already come. The winds have begun to howl through the valleys of the earth, through the streets of the cities, through the chambers of the heart. The foundations are trembling. That which seemed unshakable has begun to sway. That which was strong now reveals its weakness. That which stood tall has begun to fall. The pillars of the world are shaking. Economies falter. Nations rise against nations. Fear spreads like wildfire. Trust in the systems of man begins to crumble. But for the child of God, for the one who walks in covenant, for the one who lifts his eyes to the hills, there is another reality. There is a higher truth. There is a refuge. When the storm rises, it tests every foundation. The house built on sand is swept away. The house built on stone stands firm. And so the storm is not just a force, it is a revealer. It reveals what is true, what is lasting, and what is eternal. And so the Word speaks with power. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. The Word does not say that trouble will not come. It does not say the righteous will never face affliction. It says the opposite. But it also says this: when the trouble comes, the people of God have a place to run. The world has its own refuges, but they are illusions. They are made of smoke. The fortresses of wealth crumble in the crash. The towers of fame fall in the night. The strongholds of human power vanish like mist. But there is a refuge that cannot be shaken, that cannot be touched by the storm. That cannot be breached by the enemy. That refuge is not a place, is a person. That refuge is not built by human hands, it is built by the hands of the Eternal. That refuge is the Almighty Himself. Noah did not build the ark as a monument. He built it as a shelter, a place of refuge from the judgment that was coming on the earth. And God Himself gave the design. God Himself closed the door. God Himself upheld it through the flood. That ark is a shadow. It is a sign. It points to a greater ark. It points to the Messiah. It points to the refuge that God has given to His people for the day of shaking. The refuge is not something you visit on weekends. It is not a temporary shelter. It is not something to run to only when things get rough. The refuge is where you dwell. The storm doesn't wait for you to prepare. It comes suddenly. It comes without warning. And when it does, you must already be inside the shelter. The ark was sealed before the first drop of rain fell. The wise virgins had oil in their lamps before the cry rang out at midnight. The man who built his house on the rock laid the foundation long before the winds began to blow. And so must the people of God dwell in the secret place before the earth begins to quake. In the days of Egypt, the judgments came one by one. But the people of God were hidden, not because they were in better cities, not because they were stronger, but because they were covered by the blood. The destroyer passed over them, not because of their righteousness, but because they were under the covenant. That blood was their refuge. That covenant was their shelter. So it is again, the blood of the Lamb is the sign. The covenant is the covering. The Messiah is the ark. And the storm cannot touch what is hidden in Him. And yet the world will mock the ark as it did in the days of Noah. They will scoff at the warnings. They will laugh at the preparations. But when the heavens break open and the earth gives way, they will search for what they once despised. It is the way of the age. But let it not be so with the people of God. Let them not be found outside when the door is shut. Let them not be caught building altars to Egypt when the time of visitation comes, for the time is short, the signs are multiplying, the storm clouds are gathering, and the call is sounding across the land. Return to the shelter. Return to the place of covering. Return to the presence of the Most High. The Lord is the rock, the fortress, the high tower. He is not shaken. He is not moved. The nations rage. The kingdoms totter. But He remains. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. His voice melts the mountains. His word splits the cedars. And He calls His people not to fear, but to trust, not to tremble, but to take refuge. The strength of man fades like the grass. What begins with vigor ends in weariness. The arm that once lifted the sword will one day tremble. The voice that once declared powerfully will grow silent. The minds of the wise grow dim. The kings of the earth fall from their thrones. The athletes retire. The builders grow old. The proud are brought low. This is the strength of flesh. It rises and then it falls. It boasts and then it breaks. But the strength of God is not like the strength of man. It does not age. It does not decay. It does not reach a limit. It is eternal, limitless, inexhaustible, unyielding. It is the strength that formed the mountains, that called the stars by name, that stretched out the heavens with a word. It is the strength that holds all things together, even when all things seem to fall apart. When man reaches the end of his strength, that is when the strength of God begins to be revealed. The prophet said, "Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." There is a strength that comes not from effort, but from surrender, not from striving, but from yielding, not from the flesh, but from the Spirit. It is a heavenly strength, and it is given to those who have come to the end of their own. The Lord does not help the strong to become stronger in their pride. He strengthens the weak who call upon His name in humility. The strength of God is made perfect in weakness. Moses was once a prince of Egypt, trained in all the wisdom of the world. He had the strength of a warrior, the authority of a ruler, the privilege of royalty. But that strength could not deliver a single Hebrew from bondage. It was only when Moses was broken in the wilderness, stripped of his status, alone in the desert with nothing but a staff in his hand and a word in his heart that the power of God flowed through him. It was not the prince who parted the sea, it was the shepherd. It was not the man of Egypt who brought down Pharaoh, it was the man of the wilderness who walked with God. So it is with the people of God. We look for strength in our own resources. We trust in numbers, in wealth, in influence, in talent. But the Lord is not impressed by the horses of man, nor by the chariots of the strong. He brings down the mighty and lifts up the humble. He takes the least and makes them mighty. He takes the forgotten and sets them before kings. He took a shepherd boy and made him a giant slayer. He took fishermen and made them apostles. He took a persecutor and made him a preacher to the nations. He does not choose the strong. He strengthens the chosen. When Paul was afflicted, he prayed for the Lord to remove the thorn. But the answer was not what he expected. The answer was not deliverance but grace. The voice from heaven declared, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." The strength of God is not always to lift us out of the battle. Sometimes it is to keep us standing in the midst of it. It is the strength to endure when everything around us is collapsing. It is the strength to hope when hope seems lost. It is the strength to love when we are surrounded by hate. It is the strength to walk forward when the path is steep, the valley is dark, and the enemies are many. It is not natural strength. It is supernatural. This strength is not found in the palaces of kings or the strategies of generals. It is found in the secret place. It is found on the knees. It is found in the midnight cry. It is found in the quiet place where no one sees but God. It is found when the soul is poured out like water, and the only thing left is faith. The world calls it weakness. Heaven calls it power. The world despises the broken. Heaven crowns them, for the Lord dwells with the contrite and the lowly in spirit. He revives the heart that is crushed. He renews the strength of the weary. He lifts up those who cannot lift themselves. This strength cannot be bought. It cannot be earned. It is not given to those who boast, but to those who kneel. It is not a strength that exalts the self, but a strength that glorifies God. It is not a power that builds towers of pride, but one that builds altars of praise. When the world sees weakness, God sees a vessel. When the world sees brokenness, God sees a channel for his glory. He pours his power into empty vessels. He clothes the humble with his might. He makes his home with the lowly. His strength is not just greater than ours. It is wholly other. It is not from this earth. It is from above. It is divine. It is holy. It is unstoppable. He is not the God who was only in the beginning, the one who parted the sea and rained manna from heaven long ago. He is not only the God who will be at the end, returning with fire in his eyes and a sword in his mouth. He is the God who is the ever-present, the I am, the one who abides in the now. He is not bound by past or future, not confined to what was or what shall be. He is present in this moment, nearer than the air, closer than your breath. He is not watching from afar. He is not a distant deity seated in the heavens, removed from the affairs of earth. He walks in the fire with his servants. He whispers in the cave to the broken prophet. He draws near to the outcast, to the leper, to the widow, to the weary. He is the God who is present. He is present not only in the moments of peace, but in the days of trouble. Not only in the blessings, but in the storms. Not only in the sanctuary, but in the wilderness. He is the God who enters the prison cell. He is the God who sits with you on the ashes. He is the God who walks with you through the valley of the shadow. When others flee, he remains. When others fail, he stands. When the night is at its darkest, he does not disappear. He draws nearer still. He is not a God who waits for the storm to pass to reveal himself. He is the God who shows his face in the midst of the thunder. He is not shaken by chaos. He is not intimidated by pain. He is not repelled by your struggle. In the fire of Babylon, 3 men stood unbowed while the furnace was heated 7 times hotter than before. They were cast in, and those who threw them in were consumed by the heat. But inside the flames there was a 4th, not bound, not burning, not broken, one who looked like the Son of God. He did not wait for the fire to end. He entered it. He stood among them, and the fire could not touch what was touched by his presence. So it is with those who are his. He does not promise that you will be spared from the fire, but that you will not be alone in it. When Daniel was thrown into the den of lions, there was no human hand to close the mouths of the beasts. There was no sword, no shield, no army. There was only the presence of God, and that presence turned danger into peace, threat into testimony. He was present in the darkness of that cave, as he is present in every place his people are cast. He is not kept out by walls. He is not bound by chains. He is the ever-present help. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned for righteousness. His dreams looked dead. His favor vanished. His hopes turned to silence. But the scripture declares that the Lord was with him. That presence was not visible to the world, but it shaped his destiny. It was not a presence that removed all pain, but one that turned betrayal into purpose, prison into preparation, and injustice into promotion. The presence of God does not always change the place, but it changes the person within the place. When Elijah fled into the wilderness, crushed by fear, exhausted by battle, and feeling utterly alone, he cried to die. But the Lord was not silent. He did not send thunder, fire, or earthquake as he had on Mount Carmel. He came in a still small voice, a whisper in the cave. That whisper was enough to restore a prophet. That presence was enough to renew the weary. His voice does not always shake the earth. Sometimes it calms the storm within. Sometimes his presence comes not in grandeur, but in gentleness, not in shouting, but in stillness. And in that stillness is the strength to rise again. The help he gives is not delayed. It is not scheduled for tomorrow. It is not held back for the worthy. It is a very present help, present in sorrow, present in confusion, present when you are surrounded, present when you are forsaken, present when you feel too broken to pray, present when you have no words left to speak. He hears the groan. He answers the sigh. He is the God who sees, the God who knows, the God who comes down. The children of Israel groaned under the weight of Egypt's bondage. Their cries rose to heaven. And God said, I have seen, I have heard, I know their suffering, and I have come down. He is the God who comes down. Not in theory, not in abstraction, but in reality, in flesh, in time. In tears, he enters the pain of his people. He walks in their dust. He bears their wounds. He fights their battles. He weeps at their tombs. He stretches out his hand not only from heaven, but from within the fire. And when his presence is in the fire cannot consume. When his presence is in the storm, the waves cannot drown. When his presence is in the battle, the victory is already written. A refuge is not for the passerby. It is not for the one who merely observes it from a distance, who admires its walls, who acknowledges its existence, yet chooses to dwell elsewhere. A refuge is not a monument to be visited, nor a shelter to be considered when all other options have failed. A refuge is for those who enter in, who abide, who dwell, who make it their habitation. The scripture does not say, he who glances at the secret place, nor does it say, he who occasionally visits. It declares, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. The shadow falls only on those who are close enough to the source of light. Only those who have drawn near will be covered. To dwell in the refuge is to make God himself your habitation. It is to live not on the edges of his presence, but within the center of it. It is to draw near, not only in times of trouble, but in the ordinary, the daily, the unseen. The refuge of God is not a place for emergencies only. It is the home of the faithful. It is the place where the heart returns morning by morning, night by night. It is the place where the soul learns to breathe, not in the air of this world, but in the atmosphere of the Spirit. It is the place where strength is exchanged, where burdens are lifted, where fears are quieted, where direction is given, where love is poured out like oil. In the days of Israel's journey through the wilderness, the camp was arranged around the tabernacle. The presence of God was at the center. Every tribe, every tent, every life was oriented around the glory. The cloud by day and the fire by night did not just lead them, they covered them. But the covering was only for those who remained in the camp. Those who wandered outside the camp walked away from the shadow. So it is in the Spirit. The dwelling place of God is not simply a place to visit. It must become the axis around which your life turns. Your decisions, your desires, your direction, all must be aligned with the presence. There is a difference between visiting the house of God and living in it. There are many who run to the refuge only when the storm has already broken open the sky. But the wise do not wait for the rain. They dwell before the clouds appear. The wise do not build their house in the dry season on shifting sand. They dig deep and build on the rock before the shaking comes. The refuge of God is not merely a place to run. It is the place we are called to live. To dwell in the refuge is to build your life upon his word, to hide it in your heart as the foundation of every choice. It is to let his voice be louder than the voices of men, louder than the news, louder than the crowd, louder than fear. It is to carry his presence into every room, every street, every situation. It is to be clothed with him, to abide in him, to be hidden in him. For when you are hidden in him, the arrows of the enemy cannot strike you in your soul. The flood cannot carry you away. The fire cannot consume what has been saturated in his presence. When the Israelites placed the blood upon the doorposts of their homes, they remained inside. The covering was not for those who roamed outside in the night. It was for those who obeyed, who remained within, who trusted the voice that told them to wait under the blood. So too, those who remain in Christ, who abide under the blood of the Lamb, who walk not in the counsel of the wicked, but in the shelter of the Most High. They are those who will not be moved. The refuge is not only protection, it is obedience, it is submission, it is covenant, it is intimacy with the Almighty. Dwelling in the refuge is not about feeling safe. It is about being rightly positioned before God. It is about walking in reverence, in humility, in holiness. It is about choosing the narrow path over the broad road, the altar over the platform, the secret place over the spotlight. It is about lingering when others rush, waiting when others move, listening when others speak. It is about building a history with God in the unseen, in the hidden, in the quiet. Those who dwell in the refuge are not immune to trouble, they are anchored in peace. They are not exempt from battle, they are armed with presence. They do not avoid the valley, they walk through it with a rod and a staff beside them. Their hearts are fixed, their eyes are lifted, their footing is sure. For their dwelling is not in this world, but in the one who holds the world in his hands. The enemy comes not always with thunder, but often with whispers. He does not always wage war at the gate. He slips through unseen cracks. He comes not only with swords, but with doubts. He does not always strike the body, he strikes the heart. He plants fear in the mind, confusion in the soul, weariness in the spirit. He comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And his weapons are not always visible. He uses distraction, discouragement, delay. He wraps lies in logic and fear in reason. He does not always roar, he hisses. And in the midst of such subtle warfare, strength alone is not enough. Refuge alone is not enough. What is needed is discernment, the shield of truth, and the constant presence of the defender. The battle is not only against flesh and blood, but against powers, principalities, rulers of darkness in unseen places. The war is waged in the realm of thought, of faith, of the unseen, and it requires a shelter stronger than stone and a strength deeper than resolve. It requires the indwelling of the Almighty, for only in Him can we see clearly, hear rightly, stand firmly. The battle of this age is not merely in politics or nations or conflicts of earth. It is in and the enemy seeks to drive the people of God from their place of rest, from their secret place, from their position of peace in the presence of God. When David stood before Goliath, he did not trust in Saul's armor. He did not rely on the weapons of man. He had learned long before the battlefield how to fight in the fields. He had slain the lion and the bear in the secret place when no one was watching, when no applause was heard. He had learned to trust, not in his sling, but in his God. The battle was won before the stone was thrown, because the warrior was forged in the present. And so it is with the children of God. The victory is not in the day of conflict, but in the days of communion. The battle is not won with weapons of this world, but with weapons of the Spirit, the Word, the prayer, the praise, the fasting, the faith. The enemy does not fear our noise. He fears our nearness to God. He fears the believer who walks in the Spirit, who stands on the Word, who speaks with authority, who kneels before the throne. He fears the one who hides not behind religion, but inside the refuge. He fears the one who does not panic at the sight of the storm, but sleeps in the boat, because he knows who commands the sea. That calm is not natural. It is the fruit of dwelling in the shelter, of knowing the character of the one who said, "Peace, be still." When the enemy sees a child of God dwelling in the Most High, he must flee, not because the child is mighty in themselves, but because they are covered by the blood, surrounded by the angels, hidden in the cleft of the rock. The warfare may rage around them, but it cannot break through the wall of fire that God places around those who are His. It may press against them, but it cannot crush them. It may try to enter, but it finds the door shut and the house full of light. The enemy cannot dwell where the Spirit reigns. He cannot feast where the table of the Lord is spread. Elisha stood surrounded by horses and chariots of the enemy. The servant trembled, but Elisha saw what the servant could not see. He prayed, "Lord, open his eyes," and suddenly the hills were filled with horses and chariots of fire. The enemy had encamped around them, but the Lord had encamped around the enemy. So it is even now. Those who dwell in the refuge may be surrounded, but they are not outnumbered. The presence of God surrounds them with fire, and the armies of heaven stand ready. But the battle cannot be fought in the flesh. It cannot be fought with compromise. It cannot be fought from a distance. The people of God must draw close. They must take up the whole armor. They must stand in the evil day. They must refuse to be moved, not by the fear of the world, not by the lies of the enemy, not by the shaking of the earth. For the battle is the Lord's, and the Lord is a warrior. He trains the hands for war and the fingers for battle. He is the shield, the sword, the fortress, the banner. To those who dwell in Him, He gives not only protection, but authority, not only peace, but power. He calls them not only to hide, but to rise, to speak, to shine, to stand as lights in the darkness, as watchmen on the walls, as carriers of His presence in a world unraveling. The battle is not over. The shaking has not ceased. The enemy has not retreated. But the people of God must not fear. They must not faint. They must not forget the one who surrounds them, for He who is in them is greater than he who is in the world. There is a mystery in the way God strengthens His people, not with the strength of man, not with the might of armies, not with the resources of earth. His strength does not come from the outside in, but from the inside out. It is not born of physical power, but of divine presence. It is not the roar of the lion, but the stillness of the lamb. It is not always seen, but it is never absent. But footnote, for the strength of God is given not to the proud, not to the self-reliant, not to those who boast in their own might. It is given to the broken, to the contrite, to those who have come to the end of themselves and have learned to lean wholly upon him. The world teaches that strength is independence, that it is the absence of need, the triumph of will, the dominance of the strong over the weak, but the strength of God is made perfect in weakness. It is revealed not when all is well, but when all is shaken. It is known not in victory parades, but in the prisons of Paul, in the tears of Jeremiah, in the caves of David, in the silence of Christ before his accusers. It is a strength that does not flee suffering, but walks through it. A strength that does not avoid the cross, but carries it. A strength that does not yield to darkness, but shines within it. For the strength of God is not a momentary burst of power. It is the continual sustaining of a soul that will not let go of heaven. When the psalmist cried, "The Lord is the strength of my life," he was not speaking of a strength borrowed or rented. He was not referring to a temporary infusion of energy. He was declaring that God himself had become the very core of his being, that the foundation upon which his soul stood was not his own resolve, but the everlasting arms, that the one who called him was the one who upheld him, that when his heart and flesh failed, God was the strength of his heart and his portion forever. There are seasons when the wind is against you, when the path is uphill, when the burden grows heavier by the hour. There are moments when the voices around you say you cannot go on, that the calling is too great, the cost too high, the battle too fierce. But those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, not from adrenaline, not from optimism, but from the fountain of the Spirit that flows within. They will mount up with wings like eagles, not by flapping harder, but by catching the wind of the Spirit. They will run and not be weary, not because they are tireless, but because they are carried. They will walk and not faint, not because the journey is easy, but because the sustainer walks with them. The strength of God is not a concept, it is a person, it is not a force, it is the Lord himself. When he fills a soul, fear must flee. When he speaks, confusion is silenced. When he arises, his enemies are scattered. And when he dwells within you, you become more than a conqueror. Not because of what you can do, but because of who is with you and who is in you. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells in you. The same power that parted the Red Sea walks beside you. The same presence that filled the temple now fills your temple. You are not powerless because your strength is not your own. Gideon was hiding in the winepress when the angel of the Lord called him mighty warrior, not because he appeared strong, but because the Lord was with him. Moses trembled at the burning bush, declaring his inadequacy, but the Lord said, "I will be with you." Jeremiah said he was only a child, but the Lord touched his mouth and filled it with fire. The strength of God is not limited by the vessel, it is revealed in the vessel's surrender. When the jar is broken, the light shines forth. When the thorn remains, grace abounds. When the burden presses, the oil flows. His strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to stand in the midst of it. It is the power to forgive when bitterness beckons. It is the courage to obey when the cost is great. It is the resolve to endure when others fall away. It is the flame that burns in the midnight hour, the song sung in the prison cell, the hand lifted when the answer has not yet come. It is the cry of, "Yet I will praise him, though the fig tree does not blossom, and there is no herd in the stall." Those who are strengthened by God do not always feel strong. They often feel weak. They often wonder how they will go on. But they rise, they walk, they build, they believe, not because of what they carry, but because of what carries them. Not because of who they are, but because of who he is. The Lord is their strength. He girds them with might. He lifts them on the rock. He surrounds them with songs of deliverance. And in that strength they will not be moved.